Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 1. Hello, podsters or podroonies if you prefer. We are back again for another episode of the Film vs. Film podcast, and the last one this year. I know, it's very sad, very sad. But for our last episode, as The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim is out, a new kind of prequel anime movie, we of course are going to be talking about the Lord of the Rings films. Couldn't be anything else, really. And joining me at fairly late notice is Brian from Reviewing History podcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining me. I'm sure for your audience, this is very stark because you're getting a very British accent and then you're getting, a very New York accent.
Oh, no, it happens all the time.
Okay.
Most of my guests are Americans, so you're fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I was like, man, that's two very different accents. I feel sorry for their ears, but okay.
No. They're used to it.
Yeah, I'm from Reviewing History. We're a comedy history podcast. We watch movies based on true stories. We go through it and we tell you what's real and fake in them as we bust balls and make jokes the whole time. And that's really what our show is. And the reason I'm here is I'm promoting, we have a new Christmas special out. It's out right now on bandcamp.com. It's $5 American. You get 4 hours of Christmas podcast laughs. There's songs, games. It's tons of fun. Can't recommend it enough. And then, so that's a 3-hour podcast. It also comes packaged with an hour-long podcast where we cover Die Hard from start to finish and just have a ton of fun riffing on the movie. So it's $5. It's bandcamp.com Reviewing History. It's called The Christmas Freak-Off. The premise is it takes place at a Diddy Freak-Off December 2023 before he gets arrested and all that. There's also last year's available called This Ain't No Whack Christmas, and half of that money will always go to St. Jude. There's a bundle with both, and we honor our St. Jude commitment in that one as well. So if you want to feel like you're doing something good, have a couple of laughs, come on down, buy it, bandcamp.com, and also check out Reviewing History, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, Yelp, YouTube, all that stuff.
Nice. I feel like you've done that before, Brian.
I think you might be like my 30th podcast since November that I'm guesting on.
Wow. That is commitment personified. Jesus. Hard-working podcaster. I could not do that. So, War of the Rohirrim then. Have you seen the trailer? Excited for this one?
I've heard of it. So I heard of it, it left my memory, and then you just mentioned it, and it came back in.
Okay.
It's not something I care about. Like, I don't care about Rings of Power. I don't care about this. Like, people will watch it. It's cool. I'm just, no. I have 6 Lord of the Rings movies, 3 of which I really, really love. And,
Then the Hobbit films.
Yeah, it's like, I could watch, like, Desolation of Smaug, maybe, but, it's whatever. I have 6 movies that I care about, and the rest, whatever. I don't care what they do.
Awesome. Yeah, I think War of the Rohirrim, it definitely looks interesting. I think certainly anime filmmaking and TV is really becoming extremely popular these days. I mean, I wasn't too au fait with anime stuff in the past, but we did an anime episode earlier this year and I really loved it. And I was like, I really need to watch more. So when I have some time, I try and watch some more of them because there's so many classics I need to watch. So yeah, it's just really interesting that Lord of the Rings is going down this anime style in this prequel tale. And you've got Brian Cox in there as a voice of one of the characters. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of familiar things going on in this trailer. You've got the eagles back. You've got like a little token thing with the ring at the end of the trailer. Iowan, I think, from Two Towers and Return of the King, is, I think, our main character in this new film. So yeah, it looks really interesting. I mean, it's teasing big battle scenes as well. I mean, the scope and scale of it seems pretty big, as it should be, as a Lord of the Rings film. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for it. I don't know whether I'll go to the cinema and see it, but who knows? It looks good,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I think it's also when you're animated, you can literally do anything. You know, you don't
Yeah,
have the budget of a constraint that you do with film, so it's completely limitless what they can do. So I'm sure there will be some cool stuff.
yeah, absolutely. So, shall we go with my choice then, Brian? Fellowship of the
If
Ring, I went with. Not many films to choose from. I certainly wasn't going for a Hobbit film because they're fine. They're not like amazing, as we kind of alluded to already. As you went first, I was only left with two, Fellowship or Two Towers. So I was like, oh, it's kind of. I mean, it's tough with just all three available, let alone two. So yeah, Two Towers is great. I think it's probably universally thought that Two Towers is the weakest of the three, even though it is one giant story. But there's something about like Fellowship that really is really compelling in the fact that they're all the characters are pretty much all together from start to finish. Yeah, I would say. And I just think there's something quite nice about that. And they go to a lot of different places and they encounter a lot of different monsters and situations, which I quite like compared to the last two. It's not a criticism of the last two, but the last two, there's a lot of battles and stuff, whereas like the first one, it feels very varied in what situations they come across. And Ian McKellen especially is fantastic. So, what happens in The Fellowship of the Ring? Well, as is traditional on the podcast, we go to IMDb and see what their terrible synopsis is. And it states a meek hobbit from the Shire, Frodo, and 8 companions set out on a journey to destroy the powerful One Ring and save Middle Earth from the Dark Lord Sauron.
that basically says it all.
Yeah. So, Brian, initial reactions to you when you first saw this film?
Well, I'm going to tell you a controversial take. I've never
All right.
really liked Fellowship of the Ring that much.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I first saw this when it came out opening weekend. I didn't know anything about Lord of the Rings. I never read The Hobbit. We went and saw it. I was probably just turned 14, maybe 13 or 14, December 2001, I believe.
Yeah.
We went and saw it, and I hated it. I was like, this is so boring. I
Okay.
like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's lame. Nothing happens really. It's 3 hours. I hated it. Then Two Towers came out. I wasn't going to see it. And my friend was like, no, you don't understand. It's not like the other one. Like, this one is like just giant battles the whole time. And I was like, fine, I'll listen to you. And I went and saw it, and I loved Two Towers. After
Okay.
Two Towers, I was like, okay, I'm going to read the books. I read all the books before Return of the King came out. I went and saw Return of the King, and I love that one. Since I've revisited Fellowship,
Mm.
I don't hate it as much, but it is always my least favorite of the
Okay,
three.
Right.
I find it moves very slowly. There's good things in there. It has its moments, but overall, I would rather watch either of the other two over Fellowship.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's interesting. I think when people talk about Lord of the Rings, you kind of really should talk about all of them as a whole story, I guess. Obviously, we will talk a little bit about Two Towers when it comes up, of course. But yeah, I really like Fellowship. I'm a little bit the opposite. I think Fellowship's probably slightly my favorite out of all three. Like Return of the King second, then Two Towers third. But I mean, very small margins between all of them, I think, for
Mm-hmm.
me. It's interesting, like when I first, because I saw this quite young, like I was only like 11, 12 or something. So when these films were just getting all the Oscars, I just thought that was just like what the Oscars did, was just give Oscars to Lord of the Rings movies. It was just, I just felt like it had its own ceremony. And then when the, kind of finished, I was like, oh, okay, other films are involved in the Oscars. Fair enough. So yeah, I really like it. So directing then, I find like the opening prologue, if you will, is so good in my opinion. It's like super short, but packs so much in for the backstory of this story. And I just love the fact that you have this ginormous battle scene with elves against men and elves against like orcs and Sauron. Like immediately you get the sense of scale and what's to come in these films. Like if the action looks this big in scale within the first 7 minutes, then we're in for a treat. I love how the elves are already given like a sense of style with like the few shots they have in battle. Like I love how swift and slick they are, as one at a time as the orcs approach, they swing their swords. That looks very cool. With Sauron, he looked very powerful, like the way he effortlessly knocks people flying like they're golf balls. But what I found interesting with like the framing of Sauron is that I feel like you have like more of him wearing like the ring than you do of Sauron himself. So that kind of sort of sets you up that the focus of this film is going to be about the ring and not Sauron really in the beginning kind of thing.
I mean, well, the ring is always a metaphor, right? I mean, the ring is just a metaphor for power. So they're really just kind of establishing what that power is and the importance of it and how it corrupts and all the things that we see with the ring. It's really just setting the groundwork for that. But really the most important feat, like not important, but to me the most impressive feat of directing from Peter Jackson in this is his use of practicalness and going back to old school film techniques where it's like using forced perspective to make the hobbits look small. And I'm sure we've all seen that special on the special features, that one part where the camera kind of cranes around mechanically and it forces the perspective as it goes where they're at the table. So really, I think all the stuff in the Shire is his best directed stuff in this. To me, that's like where he's really earning his money and using every trick in his disposal to make you believe that these are, little 4-foot men.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But did you like that prologue scene, like the first 10 minutes? It really gets you going for what's to come.
It's cool. It's definitely a cool prologue, and you're like, there's a badass dark army. It's telling you everything about the elves. They're always going to kind of be beautiful and glowing, you know?
Yeah, they were super cool for me. Just the way they like slashed down some of them orcs, that was cool. I loved kind of the fight scene between Gandalf and Saruman. For a fight where they never touch each other, it feels very like physical. I love how like kinetic the camera is in nearly every shot where they're like striking each other with magic. It's almost like an animated style action scene, especially with how fast it is and the way it's like frantically framed. It's like the camera is expressing the magic itself, kind of thing. That's what I always found amazing about like the Lord of the Rings films when Peter Jackson displays magic. It's mainly done with like sound and the use of the camera where he can. Like very little visual effects are on display really, which you would certainly have now. They would chuck visual effects at the screen where possible. Not here, I wouldn't say. Like the advantage here is like the way it makes you feel as well, and every blow to the ground or the wall feels like it hurts for these seemingly powerful wizards, like, which in turn makes the magic feel weirdly grounded and real. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but yeah, it felt good in a painful way.
Yeah, there's like that element where it's almost like telekinesis where, they're kind of just flinging each other around and that's the interesting thing with the magic in this. Like when you think a wizard, typically you think big magic spells, but really Gandalf doesn't do much magic in the movie outside of like, the opening with the fireworks. And then he has that fight and he does You Shall Not Pass, but it's not like he's super magical in this, like,
No.
blasting people and doing things. He's mostly just walking.
Yeah. Yeah. And he, like, in the third one, like, he shines this beam of light to save Faramir when they're retreating from Osgiliath. That's, yeah, there's really not a lot of actual magic on display from Gandalf in all three movies, really, which
Yeah.
is kind of interesting, really, that he's seemingly this powerful figure, and it's more his wisdom that really comes on show in these films.
Yeah, he's more of a mentor than, a typical wizard. He's more of a guide. And obviously they
Yeah.
do the Jesus metaphor with him where,
Oh, yeah.
he comes back from the dead, and that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. One of my favorite characters, especially in this first film, is the Ring Wraiths, or the Nazgul. I love how they're directed in this film. Like, I love the little scene where, like, the hobbits tumble onto this road, and there's a brilliantly brash dolly zoom down the road. The leaves fly up. When the hobbits hide under the roots of this tree, the Nazgul is on his horse and just quietly appears from behind the tree and barely makes any noise, and it gives you this, like, feeling of, oh shit, he's right there. But when you do hear him move, like, the bass is, like, seems to be, like, turned up, and on every sound effect that he makes just makes the sound, like, more powerful. Like the clanking of his armor feels very heavy. I love how every time you see them, it's like they're always in slow motion, like they're sharing realities as they're, like, technically undead. So that was really interesting to watch. Plus, in Bree, I love how in sync they are when they enter the prancing pony. They come one by one holding their swords at the same angle. It's the same on the Watchtower later. Like, they all move as one until, like, Strider, as he's called at this point, Aragorn, saves the hobbits. And I loved how the fight suddenly, like, changes speed to slight slow-mo, matching how the Nazgul move. And yet it still keeps this, like, chaotic nature of the fight. Plus, I love how Peter Jackson's action style comes through when Strider throws the flaming torch into one of the Nazgul's heads. That was very cool for me. So yeah, just everything with the Nazgul I loved. Just great. Very scary.
I think what really adds to the Nazgul's menace, and this is a benefit of the movie too, is that the hobbits always feel so physically useless and incapable
Yeah.
that it's like, if any orc sees them or the Nazgul, you feel there's nothing they could do. Whereas, someone like Legolas or Aragorn, you feel they can do something to defend themselves and last. But the hobbits are so little and weak that it adds to that threat, especially early in the movie when they're still all by themselves and they're in, like, that like under that tree area. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. That was great because the proximity between the characters is really close. And as I said, like, the sound design with the Nazgul just really shone through there. And you're just like, they just feel very just powerful and very mysterious. And you're just like, you don't know what they're capable of, but it's going to be extremely dangerous. Yeah, I just really liked how the Nazgul came to life in this film from the book. I loved, frankly, the whole sequence in the Mines of Moria.
Okay.
Very good. And I loved the build up to when the orcs and the cave troll arrives. What's interesting is that it literally starts with, like, humor where, like, Pippin accidentally knocks the dwarf's corpse down the well and seems to take ages to hit the ground, and Gandalf increasingly gets more annoyed with each bang the corpse makes on its way down. Then I love the way, like, Peter Jackson uses the camera to, like, express the coming noise of the orcs. He does these, like, amazing, like, whip pans, and then the shot sort of, like, drifts as the sound comes on, which was really interesting. And I loved it when, like, Sean Bean goes to close the gate, then the camera, like, follows this orc arrow that goes straight into the gate that lands right by Sean Bean's head. So I loved how, like, active the direction is before the action really starts. And, like, when the action does start, the pace goes up a notch and kind of backs up this fast build up. I loved how everyone gets, like, a chance to shine as well, even with, like, the handheld style that Jackson goes for. Like, Aragorn lops the head off an orc, pretty soon. Kind of really good cat and mouse stuff between Frodo and the cave troll. Gimli throws an axe at the troll. That was cool. And it ends with like Frodo almost dying. So yeah, some really great intense action for me. Then the Balrog sequence is, so good and just has a great from an emotional standpoint, obviously, when Gandalf falls into the abyss.
Yeah, the Balrog sequence is almost kind of there's two emotional highlights in Fellowship. One is Gandalf dying, because it's, especially if you've never read the books and you don't know anything about it, it's kind of unexpected, and it's almost like that Obi-Wan thing where the mentor dies in the first chapter, so in the first part of a trilogy, and it kind of catches you off guard. So that's like an emotional high point in the movie. The other emotional high point is probably the death of Boromir, where he kind of he feels guilty over that he wanted the ring and all that, and that it corrupted him so easily, and he feels guilty about it. That's another emotional high point in the movie. The Mines of Moria sequence is a really fun action sequence. It's good, it's quick, it fits Fellowship, and it works for Fellowship, but it's not as narratively fulfilling as something where it's like people trying to take a point or defend a point. It's lacking that thing where it's like kind of the end goal is just to escape rather than to win a battle. So I find it to be, it's fine for the movie and it's like an entertaining piece, but I don't think it has that emotional moment where, something like Two Towers where the Ents come and they're managed to take Isengard, it's it's effective, but I don't think it doesn't like get me in the heart,
Yeah, I guess it lacks kind of this epicness that the Two Towers and Return of the King have in their action sequences. But I feel like it does a great job of creating this claustrophobic feel in a way, and like the cave troll does feel really dangerous, and like I feel like all the characters are given like really cool moments. Yes, situationally it's just about survival, but yeah. So I do feel like it holds a lot of value in the whole series. So I still like it.
It's also it is the only time we see the whole Fellowship together fighting together. Because they breaks apart shortly after this. So it is the one time we see them all together and fighting.
So it's really interesting, kind of like cutting away to each character and just like seeing how they can fight, I guess, even with like the hobbits as well. I think it's probably one of the best action scenes for the hobbits as well, because was it Pippin and Merry like jump on the cave troll? That was fun. Unwisely, I must say, but yeah, they went for it. I mean, other things with like directing, it's interesting how like the ring itself is directed with, because I was looking through the cast and the ring itself has a voice actor.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. And you can faintly hear voices when you can see all the reflections in the ring sometimes, and there's interesting moments when like Bilbo drops it on the floor when he goes off. It's a huge thud when it hits the ground, and you can really kind of sense the power of this thing just in that one moment. Yeah,
it's definitely, the object feels, especially as the movies go on, but it doesn't feel like it weighs as much as a ring. It feels like it weighs like 2 tons. Like the way it hits the floor and like the burden of carrying it, those characters feel like it's a heavy thing. So like, I do like that in the movie. Whenever it hits the floor, it lands flat. It doesn't like roll around like a ring would. It's like dropping a paperweight. It's like, boom.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got a favorite scene for you, Brian?
Ooh, it's got to be like the sequence in the Baggins house. That's my favorite directed sequence. Just, Bilbo giving up the ring and talking to Gandalf and all that. I think that's like the best stuff in the movie direction-wise.
Right, nice. I think for me, it's it was kind of really tough to choose, but I think like the last action scene in the woods for me has some of the coolest action in the trilogy for me. And you can really tell that Peter Jackson is trying to make like fantasy movies cool and fun where he can, whereas previously I don't think that was particularly there in a pre Game of Thrones world. You know, when the action starts, like Gimli, Legolas come into shot at the same time to save Aragorn, and Gimli throws his axe, and Legolas fires an arrow at different orcs at the same time. Very cool. Then Legolas fires one arrow at two incoming orcs and stops them dead, squishing them together. That was awesome. Like Gimli literally like clotheslines an orc with an axe. Very cool. And it feels like Peter Jackson is really trying to like bring in kind of trying to be really creative with the action and not make it feel like traditional sword fighty arrow fights that we've kind of always seen before in a lot of this type of thing in cinema history. You know, there's a great like wide shot of just Legolas just standing still firing arrows into orcs. You know, I loved Boromir's death scene too, where he's just got like two arrows in him and he's still fighting off orcs. It always feels epic when you have a character who you know is going to die and is not going to live for sure, but they don't give up. They still keep fighting. That's always great to see for me and gets you going emotionally. You know, I love the fact that they hold back some cool stuff for Aragorn through this whole thing. You know, when he fights the head orc, you know, by chopping his arm and head off in the climax of that fight. But the good guys don't always get all the fun. I love how the big orc like throws his shield into Aragorn's neck, trapping him on the tree for a moment. That was really good. So yeah, it was kind of tough to choose a favorite, but I think just because of the creativity in the action, I was like, oh, okay, I've got to go for this one.
I will say the action in this is way more inspired by Braveheart than it is like Excalibur.
Right, yeah.
You know, where other than being an R rating, it's very much kind of that real thing where characters get thrown into the fire. I do love that Aragorn fight with the big orc where his head is trapped and it looks like he's stuck and he has to come out from underneath and, you know, he has to find a different way to win. I think all that is cool. But yeah, I do like the way the action is handled throughout the series, honestly. This movie, though, I wish there was more. And I know it's not the path of the books, but I do wish this movie had a big epic battle at the end of some sort, you know, where it's like a big army thing. But I get that's not the books and, you know, just my minor nitpick.
Yeah, because part of me as well is like they could have had like a cool battle like across the river or something. Arrows flying across the river or I don't know, just more orcs to kill, I guess. Directing score, Brian, what are you going for Fellowship of the Ring?
I'm gonna go with an 8.5. It's really good, it's well directed. I mean, all the use of forced perspective in this is so great. Those landscape shots are awesome. Just seeing the New Zealand landscape, like it had never been shot like this before. And, you know, now it's so synonymous with Lord of the Rings. It's like one of the first things I think non-New Zealand audiences think of when it comes to New Zealand is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, just the way it's shot, I got to go 8.5 because he captured it and he creates a language that carries through for the other movies in this. So I got to go 8.5.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I agree that they create like a visual language in this first film. And I when I think about like in other franchises, like what's the best film in the franchise? Well, I always got to give props to like the original one because they did all the hard work with the design work and writing these central characters. So I'm like, you got to go with the original. But with here, they actually shot it back to back, like the whole thing. Fellowship all the way to Return of the King. So you can't really go with that argument a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an exceptional piece of work. And, you know, they actually built a lot of this stuff, as you said, Brian, and like they built Hobbiton a lot of the Shire, and you can actually, there are real places you can like stay there if you want. Probably they're real places. So yeah, I think it's pretty exceptional for me. There's like hardly any CG in here at all. It's all pretty spectacular physical stuff, and you can really feel a lot of the texture coming through in this film. So yeah, I got to go like a 9.4 for me.
Okay.
It's real good. Screenplay then. So the first half of the film is really interesting, where like Frodo is being asked to carry the ring by Gandalf and meet him there at the Prancing Pony in Bree without really knowing the true power of the ring. And at this stage, neither does Gandalf. So Gandalf especially is just working on instinct, I feel like, and is just trying to figure out a plan as they go. Like Gandalf seeks help from Saruman, but finds out that he's been betrayed Gandalf, sorry. So at this point, Gandalf is like stuck on the top of a tower and out of action for a bit. And in Bree, like Frodo and the hobbits are putting trust into Strider, who they barely know. So it's like they're going on this quest with very little direction or help, and not even knowing how powerful this ring is, really. So at this point, they're really just surviving and barely surviving too, until they get to Rivendell. So I do like how the film puts you in Frodo's shoes, who personally discovers how dangerous this whole situation is. So yeah, it's just really interesting that they really throw Frodo into the deep end. And yeah, he's really got to discover a lot of this stuff for himself. Did you like the first hour of this movie and how they kind of set up everything?
So in general, I got to be honest. This is my least favorite of the movies, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is kind of because of the screenplay. I just find that it moves so slow, and I can appreciate it later on, like in the third one, but every time I'm watching the second one, I'm like, let's just fucking go already. Come on. So it just doesn't mesh with my sensibilities that much.
Right,
I think it does a lot of good things, but again, I just would like more action, or at least something big and cathartic. I don't find the movie to be a cathartic watch. In
Right.
fact, one of the things I always think about with this movie, and comparing it to A New Hope, or the first Star Wars, when you watch the first Star Wars, you never need another Star Wars movie, and you have a complete story.
No.
Fellowship, and I know the other two exist, but let's say a world where this comes out and it bombs and they don't finish the story.
Yeah.
It really leaves you wanting. It really leaves me wanting
It's a big
every
risk,
time.
yeah.
So I'm gonna say, just because it does set up things well, I'm gonna say a 7 on the screenplay, even though it's still never my favorite watch.
Yeah, we'll get to the scores soon. Don't worry. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think that's just kind of like Peter Jackson's style of how he makes movies. He said this in the past that he loves a long movie, like a 3-hour film, and there's a lot of like dense stuff in Lord of the Rings, I think, and I think this was his one shot to like get it right. And I don't mind really the slow pace of it, and it's interesting you compare it to Star Wars. And I think I don't know whether I can't remember whether George Lucas like had the whole thing. I think he did. Like he wrote it all out. Whereas like Lord of the Rings is just like one big thick book. So yeah, it's difficult to like fit the whole of Lord of the Rings into one movie. I don't think anyone would have appreciated that, but yeah, it's tough in those decisions when you make an adaptation of something so beloved by a lot of fans.
I have another question. Have you ever watched the extended editions? I actually never have.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I don't think it particularly enhances the films in a massive way, I don't think. Because like in Return of the King, like you get more of Sean Bean in Gondor in Return of the King. But I don't think it doesn't really add too much, I don't think. So I don't think you're missing much if you haven't seen it. I think a lot of people would probably say it is the ultimate way of watching them. But yeah, I wouldn't be too disheartened if you never watch it, if I'm honest.
I've never done it, and it's something where I'm always like, I got to do it one day. But
Yeah.
again, it's like, it's already 9 hours.
Yeah.
Making it 12 hours is a big thing.
Yeah. I think it's only like, I can't remember, but like half an hour on each, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't seen them in a long time. I definitely just watched the theatrical cuts for this episode.
Me too. And it was really weird watching Fellowship, skipping Two Towers and going to Return of the King. I was like, I don't have time to watch all three. So I may go back like tomorrow and just watch Two Towers to fill in the gap.
Yeah, but, definitely.
Yeah, it was interesting to see beginning and end and miss the whole middle.
I did love Gandalf's character in this. Like, he's just kind of a big warm hug of a character, especially in the beginning. Like, and then when kind of the Balrog sequence happens, it's so good just from an emotional standpoint, and it's quite a shock for the characters. And you're like, and you feel like they have no chance of destroying the ring at this point, and it's quite a like, oh shit, what are these guys going to do? And it's really interesting when they get out of the Mines of Moria and they're all like off their feet physically and emotionally, and Aragorn just tries to get him up and and keep going somehow. So yeah,
you know what I think that scene needed, and I know this is me critiquing Fellowship and like Lord of the Rings in general, but I do think we needed to see Gandalf as way more of a big gun. Like, in that Mines of Moria sequence, he should have been like just such a badass, like immolating like orcs with like his magic. So when he's gone, you really feel like it's not just another guy. You feel like it's like, Superman is gone from the team almost. I think it needed to feel like that, because it's sad he's gone, but it's sad in like a mentor way he's gone.
Yeah.
You're not like, oh, their big gun is gone, they're fucked. Like, it's different.
Yeah, because I guess you get the sense that like Legolas and Aragorn and Gimli as well, they can take care of themselves, and you feel like they can definitely protect these hobbits just as well as like Gandalf can. But obviously I think Gandalf's value in certainly the first film is more from, like, as you say, like a mentor perspective, and through his judgment and the fact that he's a very wise man, and you can guarantee that he can make the right decision for these hobbits and for the rest of the Fellowship. So I think that's more of like where the emotional weight and loss comes from, I think. But I definitely get what you mean, because as we said in the Mines of Moria sequence, I don't think they really focus too much on like Gandalf's physical ability. You only really see that fight between him and Saruman, and and Saruman certainly wins that fight. So it's just like, oh, okay. And also, it's not really a fight, is it, between Gandalf and the Balrog? Because it's like the Balrog is just this incredible creature of a design of a creature, and it's just like, wow, that is insane. This fiery demon, it looks ginormous compared to Gandalf, and there's just kind of like a few blows that Gandalf kind of parries. Maybe that was his only intention, but I do wonder whether they could have maybe done a little bit more with the choreography of that particular scene with Gandalf and the Balrog to give you more of a sense of loss, as you're talking about, Brian. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, for sure. I agree to a certain extent.
Yeah.
One other like aspect of the film that's really interesting is kind of Aragorn's character is kind of fascinating in terms of his relationship with Boromir. Like, they have this kind of rivalry in the beginning, like the two guys that have swords as their main weapon, the two main men of the Fellowship. Like, you feel like Boromir certainly can't be trusted around Frodo, and then when Galadriel gets in Boromir's head and makes him like reminisce about the glory of Gondor, they sort of kind of bond from that point, which is kind of really interesting. But you get but you can tell like Aragorn still doesn't want to be like the king of Gondor still at this point in this story. Then at the end, obviously Boromir says he would follow Aragorn in his dying moments. That very much feels like the start of Aragorn believing he can become someone special in the grand scheme of things in this story. So it's just really interesting, the relationship between those two. Did you like that?
I love Aragorn in the movies, and I love him the older I get. Gimli was always my favorite character when I was younger, but as I get older, I love Aragorn more because he's directly tied to the metaphor of the movie. And what I love about it is in this movie, they juxtapose him with Boromir. And really what the movie is saying, by the end, because the whole thing is about power and leadership. And the only people that are fit to even wield the power are those who don't want it or crave it. That's why the ring corrupts.
It's the classic thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that's why the ring corrupts Boromir, because he has that desire and wish to rule. And that's why he's like, trying to take it from Frodo. The hobbits are beings that are incapable of rule. There could never be a hobbit army that could dictate to people, which is why they're able to carry the weight of it. Aragorn is so strong morally that he's able to reject all those things. And you get those moments where, like, I love that moment when he comes to Frodo and Frodo's like, looking at him the way he looks at Boromir. And Aragorn recognizes, he's like, I understand what you're saying and why you need to go alone. But just know, I never was going to take the ring from you. But you're right, because who knows? I still can't be trusted. And he closes his hand with it. And he's like, I would have followed you anywhere. It's the beginning of his arc to eventually become the king who is inspiring people and is fit to rule because he doesn't want to rule. And it's the beginning of that arc.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well, because with Aragorn, like, he is just a guy known as Strider. So it's just like, I don't think you really get a sense of like where his life was before we meet him. There's a sense that like he has nothing to lose as well, and that he has his moral standing, his moral ideology, etc. going into this when he meets the hobbits and like, oh, these guys need help. I can help them, defeat off the Nazgul outside of Bree, etc. But yeah, it's certainly the catalyst of his journey of just like, okay, I can be something special for these guys, maybe, and fulfill his own destiny. Because before that, it does, like, he has this kind of very stoic nature about him, but for like what purpose? There's like nothing there, I guess. He to a certain extent, he feels like a bit of a lost character until the hobbits arrive needing help.
He's very much the man with no name,
Clint Eastwood,
where he's just kind of a guy. He goes place to place. We can imagine he goes to one place, does like a whole bunch of things, goes somewhere else. He's just a drifter riding throughout.
That's a movie I want to see, like an Aragorn drifter movie. That would be awesome.
That'd be sick.
Yeah. Yeah. Favorite lines, funny lines? There's plenty in all three, frankly.
I gotta go the memes. I love I think this is the most memed movie of the three, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll go with my favorite is, all right, keep your secrets. I think that's my favorite line.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a bunch, like, a wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. And lots of giggles.
That's a good line.
Confound it all, Samwise Gamgee. Have you been eavesdropping? I haven't been dropping no eaves. Sir Honest.
I love son of a truck.
Yeah. Yeah, when he
drops the body,
Well, I love kind of the banter between Merry and Pippin when they kind of go off too early in their opinion and they say, like, what about a second breakfast? I don't think he knows about a second breakfast, Pip. I had 2 breakfasts today, actually. Bit of cereal and then French toast with bacon and maple syrup. Very nice.
That's what I want. I want breakfast. I've just been having soup all day because I'm sick. So I can't wait to have like a real breakfast again.
Yeah. Oh, and the classic one that a lot of people come to is like, if by my life or death I can protect you, I will. You have my sword. And you have my bow and my axe.
Yeah, that's good. Also, one does not simply walk into Mordor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's ironic because they do walk into Mordor
Yeah.
in Return of the Kings.
Be on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world. As they go into Moria from Gandalf. One of a favourite of mine as well is, if in doubt, Meriadoc, always follow your nose. Nobody tosses a dwarf.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And and the classic, you shall not pass. One near the end from Aragon, let us hunt some orc. That's very cool. But I think my favourite is always that kind of gets to me a little bit in the feels is from Gandalf when he says to Frodo, when they're kind of waiting, when he does figure out that he just needs to follow his nose and he's talking to Frodo and he says, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. It's just quite a profound line, and I always get myself a little emotional with that. I'm like, oh, that's a really great line for life, I guess. Yeah, that's good. Screenplay score, Brian, what are you going for?
I think I said 7.
Right, straight 7?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you could argue it is a lot of like setup, for a lot of what happens in Two Towers and Return of the King, especially. But I just love the fact that it definitely has like this real great adventure quality in this film compared to the other two. And again, I just love the fact that they go to all these different places and encounter all these different things. I just think tonally, this is like the most varied one out of the three. And I love the fact that you have a lot of the characters together, whereas in Two Towers and then Return of the King, even though I think they do a great job of like cutting between all the different stories in those two, but I just think there's just something very special, the fact that they're all together in this one, until obviously they split up. But but yeah, I just think it's really damn good. Yeah, and it is the most memeable. So I'll go like a straight 9. I think you're right though. Like certainly Return of the King and Two Towers has this better like epic feel, but I still feel like this epic feel is definitely still here in Fellowship. It just gives you this incredible sense of adventure and journey, that they're going on this huge journey, and this is only the beginning, even though they've gone through so much already in this first film. So yeah, it's cool. Acting then.
I think this is like the same grade for every one in the series. Honestly, it's a 10. Every performance that everybody gives, start to finish, is flawless. It's hard to imagine anyone else like playing Frodo or, playing Aragon or even Gimli. It's like these characters, like they're perfect as them. I don't think there's a false note. Actually, I'm going to dock at 1 point. I think the one weak note is Liv Tyler. I don't think she's particularly the best actress. So I'm going to bump it to a 9 just because I don't think she's that great.
Okay, 9 for you. Yeah, I really like, as you say, like it's difficult to it's difficult to think of any other actor in a lot of these roles. But certainly one actor I found like really kind of amazing in this was Ian Holm, who plays Bilbo Baggins. Like when Gandalf discovers he's got this ring and Bilbo's like, yes, I must leave it for Frodo, then Ian Holm goes increasingly wider-eyed and lustful for this ring, then like incredibly snappy when he's at home and aggressive very quickly when he thinks Gandalf wants it for himself. Then I love that Gandalf's like, I'm not having this anymore, and gets like kind of angry himself and like somehow dims the lights with magic Then Ian Holm becomes very like scared quite quickly, then becomes very like remorseful and guilty. Then again, like subtly tries to take the ring with him before he's being discovered again by Gandalf. Just brilliant from Ian Holm that he's got to express like such varied emotions in such like short space of time in that little scene. Yeah, he was great.
I love Gladriel in this too. Kate Blanchett is
Yeah,
always great, but I do it is this one, right? Because they're kind of blending together in my head. This is the one where Frodo tries to give her the ring,
yeah.
and she's like, "You would have a queen." Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that scene as well. They're in like this elvish forest realm of Lothlorien,
Uh-huh.
and it's kind of a scene where like Frodo looks into this well and sees this very dystopian future of Middle Earth, which is certainly a scene that you see a lot in, I feel like, in fantasy films like this, like your main character like seeing a dark future ahead of them, but usually like the character showing your hero the future is someone to be trusted, but like Kate Blanchett plays it like you're not really sure where you stand with her. Like she's very mysterious and holds like a lot back as she's like pouring water into the well, almost teasing Frodo with the slightest of smiles on her face. Then she's like kind of amazing when like Frodo offers her the ring. As you say, like the mysterious face she has falls away and like the desire in her eyes comes through just like a little bit. Then when like the visual effects happen with all this green, it's like she goes into like complete evil mode in her eyes. Then when she comes back to normal, she looks very like human, like catching her breath. Then this very like sophisticated nature comes back, but this time it's more like a motherly figure that comes out of her eyes. You're like, yeah, she's definitely an ally now. So it's just a really quite compelling performance from Kate Blanchett. At first, you're like, you really don't know where you stand with this character, even though she's an elf and we associate elves as being good guys. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? But yeah, then it ends up that, yeah, she's very much a strong ally for these guys.
She manages to pass the test and reject the power, which is like an awesome scene, because so few characters in the series are really able to do it. It's like her and maybe Aragon. That's it. Everyone else, they kind of, the ring gets to them eventually.
Yeah, definitely. Another scene I love from Ian Holm, who plays Bilbo, I think later when he's in Rivendell, because he looks a lot older because like the ring has been keeping him young. He sees the ring around Frodo's neck, I think, and again he has this lust and greed in his eyes, but it's more like subtle this time, and you don't expect anything to happen. Then from almost complete like stillness, he snaps at Frodo. And he almost like screeches at him, and his eyes go all dark, and it's actually quite scary to watch. Then like the guilt really hits home this time for Bilbo, and he starts like crying this time. So yeah, so good from Ian Holm, and it always comes up in conversation or in stuff on TV, like what's the scariest moments in non-horror films, and this scene always seems to come up. And then, I agree, it's freaking scary.
It's a really good jump scare because it comes out of nowhere. You're not ready for it at all,
Yeah. You're just so surprised like how dark his eyes are. Like, yeah. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, he's completely changed.
Yeah. I also thought like Sean Bean was amazing with Frodo towards the end. Just, again, as you're saying, like the way he kind of feeds after the ring, and literally kind of tries to kill Frodo at the end. Frankly, it's just like fucking hell. This ring's powerful, man.
I love the sense of guilt that Sean Bean has. It's one of the highlights in the movie for me that he feels bad about what the ring has done to him, and it kind of almost puts him in his place in the universe in a way when he realizes like, oh, the ring got me. I'm really not worthy, and I betrayed Frodo. I messed everything up. And he feels that guilt. And I think it's really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Favorite performance for you? Who are you going for?
Oh, I gotta say, in this one, my favorite performance is probably Gandalf, because in this one
Ian McKellen. Yeah.
Ian McKellen, yeah, sorry, I should have called him Gandalf.
That's all
Gandalf
right.
is not an actor. Yeah,
There's a
but he
wizard.
is Gandalf to me.
Yeah.
Do you ever see that bit on Extras with Ricky Gervais and Ian McKellen?
I haven't seen extras for so long. Remind me.
If you go on YouTube, it's awesome. It's so Ricky Gervais is like a wannabe actor, and he runs into Ian McKellen, and he's talking to Ian McKellen like, "How do you act so well? Like, what is your secret?" And he's like, "Well, what I do is I think of what a wizard would say, and then I say that." So he's like, I would say, "You shall not pass," but he goes, "I think of what a wizard would say, and I say, you shall not pass." And he goes, and that's it. It's really funny.
Does he say the same thing when he's playing Magneto?
Yeah, probably. I like to think that.
Yeah.
But I love how warm he is at times, and like stern, and he has like almost like a father figure element to the hobbits. And he has like the emotional moment in the movie where he knows he's about to die and he's warning everybody else. That or Sean Bean, those are the two best performances, I think. I don't think anybody else has super heavy lifting to do in this like they will in the future ones.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going for Ian McKellen as well as Gandalf. As you say, like he's such just a big warm hug of a character, and you feel really safe when you're in his company, and it is quite an emotional gut punch when he does die, and you're just like, oh shit, I don't feel so safe no more when you're watching it. So yeah, he's absolutely fantastic, and definitely one of the characters where you're just like, I can't imagine anyone else in this role other than Ian McKellen for sure. Yeah, and Ian Holm, I know he's not in it that much as Bilbo Baggins, but when he is on screen, he makes a huge impact for me. So yeah, my score though for acting, yeah, it's really freaking good. So I'll probably go like 9.6.
Okay, yeah, I mean it's hard to argue.
Yeah, you sticking with 9?
Yeah, I'll stick with 9. I'm fine with it. Like I said, there's no performance in the movie that makes me want to cry. Whereas, when I watch Return of the King, I get choked up several times.
Yeah,
so
interesting to find out what moments. I definitely know what mine is. Right, let's add up the scores though for the Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah, Fellowship of the Ring gets a very impressive 52.5.
What's the record on your show?
At the moment, our best movie for this year is The Lighthouse in the 55s.
That would be like a 10 across the board for me. That movie is perfection.
Yeah, well deserved. Yeah, 55.5, The Lighthouse, number 1. And actually, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is number 2.
Wow.
That's it for part 1. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 2 to see who wins. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episode. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.